students from many different countries as well. What I would like to do today is I will be able to continue our conversation that we had last week as we talked about global intelligence, global leadership, and cultural intelligence. I'm going to be doing a very short review of some of the presentation, and then I'll be communicating some things that we did not have a chance to interact on last time. I will share the PowerPoint with you, and I will have to admit that my presentation does not follow the advice of your sensei. And the reason I have communicated so many words on my slide is so that you would be able to go back to the PowerPoint and be able to understand and have some more material that you can look at. Now, let me go back. I need to try to find my PowerPoint slides a second so I can make my presentation. I cannot show all windows. Okay, here we go. Share. All right. And I will, from the beginning. Again, we were discussing last time insights for global leadership and cultural intelligence. And so we discussed very briefly what CQ is. And CQ, again, is very similar. It's what has the idea of IQ and EQ. IQ is our intelligence. EQ is our emotional intelligence, but CQ is our cultural intelligence and the ability to be able to interact with different cultures very successfully. I gave the illustration of these two slides because culture is very broad, and in my first experience, I talked again about how culture is even observed when a person goes to Tokyo or to Osaka and sees how a person enters into the escalator, that every culture, every country, and every individual has a culture that they're in processing. So my intelligence as a young professor or a new visitor in Tokyo, I had to learn that difference that was taking place. See, culture is defined as the beliefs, the values, and the customs and attitudes that make up a group, or at least distinguishes it from another. Now, I have a question at this slide that we're going to discuss at the end of our presentation today. And the question is, how sensitive are you to other cultures? I will be presenting at the end of my presentation 6 stages of cultural sensitivity. We'll begin with the denial stage, and then we will go ahead and proceed all the way to the integration stage. And I'm going to give you a chance to discuss in a small breakout group how sensitive you are to other cultures. Now, the reason I want to do that in our class is because, again, we have people from Japan, from Vietnam, from Saudi, from France, from India, from China, from Bosnia, all in this class. And so each person has a culture that they are bringing to this course. And so what I would want you to do is to think through how sensitive you are to the different cultures that we're going to be discussing. Why is this so important? 70% of international ventures fail because of the lack of cultural intelligence. Now, the broad outline from the book that we have used is the 4 capabilities of CQ leaders is CQ drive, what is their motivation? CQ knowledge, what is their understanding? CQ strategy, how to make sense of all the cultures you're dealing with. And the last one is the CQ action, or the behavior. One thing that you are doing, even in your presentations that you just did for the class and for each person, that is part of CQ action. You adapted your presentation into your second or third language. For some of you, it's your second language, English. Others, it is your third language. And you adapted that presentation into an English audience. And that's very important for your CQ action if you're going to be presenting in a classroom or in a presentation in your field of study. Now, last week we talked about what is your motivation, or why do you want to be a CQ leader? But I posed a question during the lecture last week, and the question that I posed was, what is your purpose in life, or my purpose in life is? What I would like to do is to discuss this topic of one's purpose in life for a few minutes this evening. Kind of goes back to understand that every leader knows their purpose. If you were to ask any global leader, or if you were to ask any maybe leader even in a university setting or different settings, that each person needs to understand, or each leader needs to know why, or not just why are they leading, but what is their purpose in life, because that goes back to what the definition of leadership is. I will give you a couple of definitions. And again, you do not need to write all of these down, because you will get this as a Obari Sensei will give this to you as a handout at the end of class. But leadership is influence. It's the ability of a person to influence other individuals. That's by Sanders. McNeil said the same thing. Leadership occurs anytime one attempts to influence a group of or individuals of people. Next one, leadership is the process whereby an individual influence a group of individuals to achieve a common goal. That I like that definition, because it has the understanding that you're leading someone, or the leader is taking someone to a direction. They're actually leading them to a purpose. They're leading them to an objective. My definition of leadership is accepting a calling upon your life as you live a life of personal character, influencing others toward a worthy goal. Now, the aspect of purpose relates to that worthy goal. Why am I seeking to teach? Why do I want to influence? What is my purpose? Why am I doing the things that I am doing? That goes back to my personal story. I want to show you some pictures of my life. This is where I grew up when I was a young man. We lived out still in Kentucky on a big hill, and this was the home that we lived in. The home was built in the 1800s, very, very old. It was large. It had about 1,200 square feet. This was taken 4 years ago. As I was examining my purpose, I went back to my home to see if the home was still standing. As you can tell, no one is living in it now. Actually, and you can see this was the bottom picture. To the bottom is the back of the house, and it is actually caving in. This next picture is significant, and it's significant because this little square on the corner of the house was my bedroom. That was where my first bedroom. Until I was 14 years old, we lived in a smaller home, and I slept on the floor in front of the TV set in our home on a mat up until I was 14 years old. When I turned 14, we moved into this home right here, and this was my bedroom. But the home was very old. My father was an alcoholic and could not keep a job. And so my bedroom did not have any heat in it, and our home had no running water. And so we were very, very poor. At night, when I would go to bed in the winter, I would get a glass of water, and I would drink my glass of water, or I would set the glass beside my bed. And when I woke up in the morning, the water in my glass would be frozen with ice, because that would be how cold it would be in my house. And because of that, my focus in life was education, money, things, and to be happy. And so when I went to college, I was an engineering major. Electrical engineering was my major, and I wanted to make all A's in engineering. I wanted to graduate with a degree in engineering, start making a lot of money so I could buy a lot of things. I was going to buy a Corvette, then I was going to build a big house, then I was going to get married, and then I was going to get a bigger car and a bigger house, and then I was going to get a bigger wife, and I was going to be happy. The more things that I accomplished in life. And then when I was in college, that was my focus. But halfway through my college experience, someone showed me this quote and it said, there is a God-shaped vacuum in the heart of every person, and it can never be filled by any created thing. It can only be filled by God through Jesus Christ. That quote is actually a misquote of a very famous person that some of you may have heard of, and his name is Blaise Pascal, the great mathematician, the French mathematician. This is what he actually said. This is the quote of a book that he wrote in 1660. He says, what else does this craving, or the craving to be happy, the craving to have meaning in life, and this helplessness proclaimed that there was once in man a true happiness, of which all that now remains is an empty print and trace. He says, this he tries in vain to fill everything around him, seeking in things that are not there, the help he cannot find to those that are there, though none can help. Since this infinite abyss can be filled only with an infinite and immutable object, in other words, by God himself. What Pascal is saying is that each person in our heart we want to have meaning and purpose, and we will try to fill that meaning and purpose with something. I had to re-examine my own life. And so what I want you to think about in your own life is, what is your purpose in life? Each person has to decide. Each person has to think for themselves. Is it money? Is it things? Is it happiness? Is it objectives? Is it education? Is it honor? Ralph Waldo Emerson, a great a poet and philosopher, said the purpose of life is not to be happy. It is to be useful, to be honorable, to be compassionate, to have it make some difference, to have your life make some difference, that you have lived and that you have lived well. So a purpose does 5 things for us. This is a book from a book called The Purpose-Driven Life by Rick Warren. It's one of the most top-selling books in America in the last 20 years. Millions of copies have been sold. And again, The Purpose-Driven Life. And he says your purpose in life does 5 things for you. Knowing your purpose gives you meaning. It basically tells you, this is why I get up in the morning. I have a meaning. I have purpose. I have an understanding of who I am. Secondly, knowing your purpose simplifies your life. It tells you, I do this, but I don't do this other thing. You know, I've asked a number of you what your major in college is. And do you know what you call a person that does not have a major? You call them a perpetual student. Because if you do not have a major and choose a topic, you will never graduate from college. And you have to make sure if you're computer science, or if you're mathematics, or if something is your major, it simplifies and you do not take extra classes. So knowing your purpose helps to simplify your life. Thirdly, knowing your purpose focuses your life. It's much like a laser beam. What is a laser beam? Like a laser pointer? A laser beam is focused light. It causes you to think very directly, and this is where I want to put my energy. Fourthly, knowing your purpose provides motivation for your life. It not only tells me why I get up, but it gives me a sense of excitement. It gives me a sense of fulfillment. It gives me a sense of understanding. And as we have been talking about CQ, or cultural intelligence, it gives even an understanding as, why do I want to be a global leader? Why do I want to have cultural intelligence? And lastly, knowing your purpose helps prepare you for eternity, because it does relate to that God-shaped vacuum in each person's life. And I would encourage you to consider and to what your purpose in life is. So my purpose in life is what I would like Obari Sensei to do, just for a very few minutes. I know that you have not planned a long presentation, but in my classes at Western Kentucky, the very first thing I ask all of my students to do is to write a paragraph and it says, my purpose in life is, and they have to write out a paragraph on what their purpose is. I want you to just discuss, Bari Sensei, only if maybe just for 4 or 5 minutes, just very briefly, each person in your breakout group, I want you to answer what do you think your purpose in life is, or what does it at least entail? What are some things that is involved in your purpose in life? So Obari Sensei, if you could break us up into a small group, that would be wonderful.
All right,
and we
good. Yeah, I will do that. All right, good.
Blaise Pascal before?
Of what? Sorry, I did not heard.
Yes. Had you heard of him before?
Of who?
Of Pascal, the mathematician from France.
Ah, yes.
Okay, I was curious if you had done so. Well, what your purpose in life? What is your purpose in life? What do you think?
Should I start? I think that, so for me, I think that my purpose in life is similar to my career life. I would like to become a professor at university. That's what I want. That's
Okay.
both my career objective and my purpose in life. Because I would like to be able to both work on my research to contribute to the society, and in the same time have a teacher position in order to share my knowledge and help students to find their way. Because during my education, I had few professors who were really great and were able to make me motivate about their subject, about their research field. And I would like to be able, maybe in the future, to be like them and to help students to find their way.
That is wonderful. That is very other-centered. It's you're wanting to help other people, and that is excellent. And to pass on your knowledge, it's not just about yourself. It is about other people, and that is wonderful that you would like to have impact in another person's life. Very good, very good. And your major is again computer science, correct?
Yes, artificial intelligence.
Artificial intelligence. Hi. Okay. Good. Well, that is wonderful. Okay, San, how about
hello.
you? Yes.
Sorry, I want to talk about my purpose about CQ leader.
Okay.
My purpose in life is certainly not to be a CQ leader, because I know my character, I'm very fit, but I want to increase my CQ. We all know this is an age of globalization. International exchanges and
Well, welcome back. Welcome back to the class. I want to offer to anyone, would anybody like to share with the entire class what your purpose is? You don't have to, but is anyone that would like to share with the entire class, my purpose is? If so, unmute yourself and talk to us a second. No volunteers? Okay. Well, again, I would encourage you, that is very important for you to think through what is my purpose and why do I want to do the things that I am doing. I'll go back and I will share my screen and we will continue the conversation on global leadership and cultural intelligence. My purpose in life is, after we talked about your CQ motivation or your CQ drive, we talked about and spent most of our time talking about CQ knowledge and about understanding the differences in cultures. And we discussed even the aspect of the cultural iceberg and the importance of you and I understanding different worldviews. And you had you made a presentation about CQ knowledge. I showed the CQ, the worldview or the iceberg, and the whole concept of, again, your CQ of the worldview is the concept of the lens and how you see your world, the lens that you're looking at. And each of us look through our world with a different set of lenses. And what we're going to be doing tonight is unpacking how we can be more sensitive to the lenses that we're actually seeing the world through. We looked at these 5 qualities of a worldview: God, reality, knowledge, morality, and humanity. Now, there are more elements to a worldview than just those 5. There are other aspects of a person's worldview, but these are the 5 key that we see throughout every culture and every civilization. What I'm going to talk about today is the aspect of CQ strategy. Basically, what will be our strategy? How do we actually become, and what needs to take place in our life to have the knowledge that we have actually come out in our action? And what we need to do is we need to develop a model of cultural sensitivity. And that's what I want us to discuss, is how we can become more culturally sensitive when we look at different aspects of cultures. It's called developing a model of intercultural sensitivity, or DMIS. It was developed and created by Dr. Milton Bennett. And in this model, he develops a continuum of a range of ethnocentricness to ethno-relative. And it looks like this. This slide here is very important. I will come back to it a couple of times because this shows a spectrum. It shows the degrees of a person's sensitivity to different cultures. And there's 6 steps to the process: denial, defense, minimization, acceptance, adaptation, and integration. I will discuss each of those, but then first I want to talk about the difference in ethnocentric and the aspect of being ethno-relative. Ethnocentric versus ethno-relative. Now, you may be familiar with these words, but I would like to discuss those with you. First of all, ethnocentrism. The word is a compound word. The word ethnos means race or means ethnicity, and centrism means centered. And if a person is ethnocentric, what they believe is that their ethnicity or their race or their culture is at the very center of all of their world and of all of their observations. They perceive that their culture is better than other people's culture, and that they have this is actually a tendency that all of us have. All of us can have a sense that we're ethnocentric, that our culture, our personal culture, is better than someone else's culture. I have a question I'd like to make. Is Shamir? Is that your name? Is it Shamir? You're from India, correct?
Yes. Yes.
Do you want to go back to India after you finish your degree?
Yeah, I don't mind.
Why would you want to go back?
I think there's many problems in India that need to be solved, and I have acquired some skills and knowledge of how the world works as a result of studying in Japan, and I think I can be useful to some of those problems.
Yeah, it's very natural for Shamir or anyone else to want to go back to your culture because you like your culture. It's not that you don't like the Japanese culture. It's not that you don't enjoy Tokyo, but you like India. That is from your home culture. And see, we all have that tendency to think, oh, if you're from Saudi, we have students from Saudi or from Bosnia, others, you want to go back partially because this is my culture. I'm comfortable there. And so, but what happens is sometimes our ethnocentrism keeps us from seeing other cultures very well. Let me show you another example for this. This is a world map. You have seen this many times. You see the very center is the continent of Africa. Then you have to the west, you have, of course, the Americas. You have to the east, you have Russia and China and India and Japan and etc. This is a normal world map that you probably see in India, or you see in China, or you see in Japan, or you see in most other countries of the world, unless you come to America. And if you come to America, you might find this map. Now, what is the difference in this map and the one we just looked at? What's in the center? The United States. Now, why would the United States be in the center of this world map? Well, this map is about 30 years old, actually. And you can find, sometimes you can still purchase these, but it's because many people in America believe that the whole world revolves around America. Meaning that's an example of being ethnocentric. Now, there's nothing wrong to be an American and to like America. That if you're studying in Japan or if you're studying in India, that you would want to go back. But when we become ethnocentric too much, we start to think that we are the best or we're the only culture that really exists. And that keeps us from having cultural intelligence, and especially keeps us from having a sense of being sensitive to the other cultures around us. So what I want to do is to explain those different stages. Now, we're moving from ethnocentrism to being ethno-relative. Ethno-relative, you probably have never heard of this word before. It was a word that was coined to mean the opposite of ethnocentric. And it means there's a person who is comfortable with the standards and the customs and adapt his or her behavior to the other culture that they're going to. For instance, in my life, when I come to Tokyo, it's going up on the left-hand side of the escalator. It's when I'm in Tokyo, I try to eat with chopsticks. In America, I never use chopsticks. When I'm in Japan, I take my shoes off when I walk in a person's house because that's what's normal. You adjust to the culture. Well, there's 6 stages to that process: denial, defense, minimalization, acceptance, adaptation, and integration. Now, I want to show this with pictures a second. Look at this slide. There are 2 cultures represented in this slide. You have the culture of the fish or the ocean or water, and then you have a human up here, and he's in a water suit with a helmet on. There are stages to his development in him understanding the culture of a fish. First of all, he is denying. He will not even look at the fish. He does not even believe that there is a difference in his culture and the culture of the fish. Second one, you see, not only is he not denying anymore, but he's in defense of the fish. No, I'm not even going to acknowledge, and I am going to defend that my culture is the best. Minimalization says that, hey, I will start to look at you. I will start to examine and really start to think that there's a different, that we are 2 different cultures involved. Acceptance, you become aware of the differences. Adaptation is you start to interact in a very real way. And integration is that you don't even have the water suit on anymore. But there really is a progression in each person when it comes to their stages of being interculturally sensitive. Now, at the very end of these next 10 minutes or so, I'm going to ask you to get in groups again, and I'm going to have you discuss what stage you are in when it comes to being culturally sensitive or having DMIS. And so pay attention, because I want to have you discuss in your groups the differences in the cultural sensitivity. But I will first describe the stages a little bit more. First of all, it's the denial stage. This is a stage that is often created based on the belief that a person's culture is the only real culture. Oftentimes, people in this stage in denial are not interested in cultural differences. They don't even embrace that there is even a difference in a culture. I have a good friend who lives in Tokyo now, and he's been in Tokyo for about 15 years. He moved when he was 20 years old. He wasn't from Japan. He was from another country, came to Japan, and for the first 6 months of his life, he never left his house. And for 6 months, he had people bring him food. He went outside to walk sometimes, but he never embraced the culture. He lived in denial literally for 6 months until his family said, you have got to start developing and learning the Japanese culture. He's now a professional in Japan, and he knows the language and is doing very well. But for the first 6 months of his life living in Tokyo, he lived in denial. And there are some people even now, when they go to another culture, they deny that there's even a change, and they stay only in their culture that's taking place. The second stage is the defense stage. The defense stage is often when you know that there's another culture, but you defend your own culture to say, my culture is the best and your culture is not good. So if I'm in Tokyo, I say, no, I will not use chopsticks. I will only use a fork. Or no, I will not climb up the escalator on the wrong side because that is stupid. Or no, that is not good. Or why would you do that? Or I want to leave my shoes on. And you defend your culture, saying that your culture is better. And it often causes conflict and causes difficulty in the relationships. Again, this is a picture. Here is he denies first the fish. Secondly, he defends his own culture against the fish. The third stage is a stage of minimalization. The person minimizes the differences that are in the culture. You know there's a difference, but you don't say it's as important. You often, you suppress it, and you don't believe that, yes, they may have a different skin tone, or the food may be different, but we're all the same. There's really no difference in our culture. There are some phrases that are often used in this stage that are interesting. One is the state says, I have this intuitive sense of other people, no matter what their culture. Or is that it's a small world, and since it's a small world, our differences really aren't that important in life. But you start to minimize the differences of the culture. And what happens when you do that, that really is an insult to that culture, because the culture like Japan or China or India or Saudi or Bosnia, or the culture is very rich in heritage. And if you minimize it, you're saying your culture is still better. The fourth stage, and this is the first stage of the ethno-relative stage, is a stage of acceptance, is where you start to understand and accept, oh, there is a difference in our culture. You recognize and you appreciate those cultural differences, the stages. You have you promote beliefs. You have an important aspect of the stage. People in this stage are often curious about the other stages that take place there. And so you really start to understand the significance of those. When you move from acceptance, then you move to adaptation. But to move to adaptation, in order to move to this stage, learners have to gain cultural specific knowledge, and you have to start to understand the values and the beliefs, and tolerate the differences in those two stages. Now, look at the difference here in this slide real quick of the stage of to minimize versus to accept. You're not just looking at the fish, you're actually you're interacting with the other culture, and you're beginning to accept it. And that's the first stage, or the first step, to actually start to adapt. The next stage, stage 5, is adaptation. is the learners begin to be competent in how to communicate with other cultures. They start to incorporate the other cultures' worldviews into their own worldviews. And you really start to look into the culture with a different set of eyes. You're now starting to put on their lenses and think, oh, this is why they act this way, or this is why this is their behavior. This is why, and you start to change some of your behavior and learn to communicate more effectively with that new culture that you're a part of. Well, there are key to move to some adaptation to integration. Learners must be able to experience empathy for the other cultures. Learners must also develop risk-taking skills and problem-taking skills. You have to try the language. You have to try to do a presentation in English or do a presentation in a different language. You have to eat different kinds of food. You have to go places by yourself. And that's the learning to become more integrated in the last. And the last stage is a stage of integration. And integration is when the person starts to live in that culture and embrace that culture, and even their identity starts to begin in that culture. People that become fully integrated, they become mediators, they become translators, they become the people that bridge the cultures together. They're the person who stands in the gap between each of the different cultures, and you bridge and you promote harmony with those two cultures. And think about that. Many of you are from different cultures in different countries. You have the privilege as a global leader to stand in the gap and to bridge your culture with another culture and stand and mix those cultures together to help them to be able to interact, to help them to get along, to help to defend or to diffuse, not defend, to diffuse any conflicts that take place. Now, phrases that the person uses that is integrated says, sometimes I feel like I don't fit anywhere. They're so much involved in both cultures that they feel like which culture is the one that I'm the most comfortable with. They feel most comfortable at bridging the differences between the cultures. My daughter, living in Tokyo, has been there for 10 years now. She is not fully integrated, but she enjoys the culture of Japan better than she enjoys the culture of America. And she will probably live in Japan the rest of her life. She has adapted and embraced that culture, the Asian culture, and can be a translator, can be a mediator between those different cultures that are there. And you see it up there in this picture again. You see the man that he's taken his water suit off, and he is with the fish, and he's fully embraced as an example of a cultural sensitivity in his life. Now, the question I have here that I would like for you to discuss is, what stage do you think that you're in? Now, if you're from India, or if you're from Saudi, or if you're from China, or from Vietnam, or from another culture, then it's going to be easy for you to discuss. But if you're from Japan, I want to ask you the question, how this relates to you is, how sensitive are you to people of another culture? Are you willing to learn from other cultures who may come to Japan? And so I want you, Obari Sensei will break us up into groups again, and I want you to discuss that question. What stage do you think you are in between denial and to integration and cultural sensitivity? Obari Sensei, you may break us into groups.
Like if we say, I believe in something, then it's something core for me. I don't think that if someone wants me to change my religion or my belief, it will be something acceptable or flexible for me. I will be the denial side. But when it comes, let's say, to some kind of food or traditions or something, I am very flexible to learn it, to adapt it as well. If someone wants to go next.
Yeah, I think my stage is acceptance. Uh, I believe there are differences, and I believe that I should take
Okay, welcome back. Hopefully you had a chance to interact with the stage that you have had and where you are in the culture. And I would encourage you, it's most important thing is not what stage you are in, but it's where you are headed. That for you, that are you increasing in your cultural sensitivity? You don't have to be perfect. You don't have to be integrated, but are you growing more? You know, I told my group that I believe I am probably in between acceptance and adaptation. I've accepted the differences and I try to adapt, but I'm not in the Japanese culture enough to adapt in all ways. But I try to, language, one other person made a statement about language. Language is, it's hard to be integrated unless you are able to master the language. And the Japanese language or the Chinese language, whatever language you're adapting to, can be very difficult. You're to be applauded for your willingness to try to adapt even in your presentations that you give in English. I'm going to show this.
Would you just give me a second, you know?
Yes, please.
And the older student, I will ask you to choose one of the 6 stages, okay? Here we go. What is your stage now about the intercultural sensitivity, okay? Are you going to choose from 1 to 6?
Oh.
Okay, could you just choose one of those, you know? Only the 2 more. All right. Okay, I think I will stop it. Yeah. Here we go. Can you see this?
Yeah, very interesting.
Yeah. You see?
Yes. 40% minimalization and 40% acceptance and 20% adaptation, right? Adaptation. Good.
Yes. All right.
Yes, thank you very much.
Yep, yep.
That's a great observation.
Maybe later, toward the end of the course, I will ask you to just choose one of these once again, okay?
Yes, that would be good. That would be very. That's a good. Yes, after in 3 or 4 more weeks, see if that has changed.
Yes, yeah.
That's a great idea.
You know, sensitivity going to be changed. Yeah. All right. Good.
Yes. I will just show a couple more slides, Obari Sensei, and then I will turn it over to you. I know you want to wrap up the class, and so let me a couple of things real in conclusion, or at the end of the stages here. Let me see where we are. The last point of becoming a global leader with cultural intelligence is your actions. You talked about your CQ drive. We've talked about your CQ knowledge. We've talked about your CQ strategy. The last section is your CQ actions, and that is what behaviors do you need to start adapting and accepting? For those of you that are in the minimalization stage, this is a very good and very important question. Is that what actions do you need to start changing that you, or at least that you need to accept that are different? Sometimes those actions are very simple. It's as simple as I've said before, giving a business card is how you, or it's in Japan, it's instead of touching, it's just greeting with bowing. You know, it's learning some of that behavior, the actions that take place. Sometimes it's your communication. It's your verbal and your nonverbal communication. You have a privilege in this class to learn from Obari Sensei. He is an expert in communicating, especially with the internet and with PowerPoint presentations. He will teach you how to communicate and have very good CQ action. So just follow his steps. He has made presentations all over the world, and so you can listen to his advice on making presentations. But the question you need to think about with your CQ actions is, when do I not adapt, or when do I change my behaviors? Becoming culturally sensitive does not mean that you accept everything of the other culture. You do accept it when it comes to, you understand it, but you do not have to, and you tolerate it, but you don't have to always agree with it. This comes especially when it comes to the different world issues of a person's worldview, when it comes to their view of God, when it comes to their view of morality. Just because the culture treats someone a certain way doesn't mean that you have to do so. I will give you an example. If you're from India, well, if you're from, almost every culture has a McDonald's. But what is different about McDonald's in India? The hamburger, you tell me, Shamir?
There's no beef.
There's no beef. So
no
a Big Mac does not have beef, because in India, their religion of Hindu, you do not, cattle are very important. And you do not eat cattle. And so now, Shamir, when he comes to Tokyo and goes to McDonald's, he doesn't have to eat a beef Big Mac. He can eat something else. But so you do not have to always change your behavior to be integrated and to have cultural intelligence. You have to decide what's important that you will not change. Your belief in God, often your morality, some of those things you can tolerate and you can understand, but you do not have to embrace all of those different things. We have looked at 4 areas: CQ drive, CQ knowledge, CQ strategy, and CQ action, your behavior. All of those are part of becoming a global leader and a person of cultural intelligence. And so this is just personal reflection you can think of if you would like. What are 2 to 3 things you've learned from the lecture? You may want to write them down, or what questions that you have that you would like to have learned. But with that said, I will turn it over to Obari Sensei so he can wrap up the course for this evening.
Okay, thank you very much for the very stimulating talks, Professor Weakley. And I think, could you just write down the most important keywords and phrases you listened to through today's lecture? Okay, using your chat. Okay, you just wrote down. Please, could you write down some?
Strategy, motivation, purpose in life. Okay. Purpose. Okay. Purpose in life, stages of sensitivity. I would agree. 6 stages. I'd like to learn more about how to overcome. Ooh, that's good. Yeah. Those are very good comments. I appreciate that. Very insightful. Badar said that, you know, it's hard to become, is it possible even to become fully integrated? That's a very good question. I like to learn more about overcoming our blind spots. Boy, that's very wise. I mean, each of us have blind spots. Each of us don't understand. We may not realize, oh, yes, don't even realize I'm being insensitive about this cultural issue. So that's important. Purpose in life is very, very significant, very important to know. Excellent. Well, thank you. Those are very helpful, insightful. I would like to communicate. If any of you would like to correspond more on Facebook or by email, I would be glad to interact with you on any of these kind of topics. And so do not hesitate.
Yeah. Could you, Professor Weakley, could you write down your email address here?
I will do so.
Some of them couldn't get in Facebook because of some certain regulation, you know. For next week, I will ask you to make maybe 10 slides. And I just, you know, uploaded 2 articles about worldviews. These 2 papers were written by Professor Dr. E. Margaret. She has been my mentor for 20 years. She's not now teaching at the University of Oxford. She's a sort of a theologian, but she's very familiar with the science and theology. So it's not a long paper. I ask you to read the 2 papers. And then I want you to think about how the worldview affects your life, okay? And you make 10 slides, and next week you're going to have a 5 minutes presentation. Is that okay? But you have to include your own worldview, a life purpose. And also, what is the difference between graphic 1 and 2? I will, you know, some graphic 1 and 2 I will show, you know, here. And Rick Warren, he's a very famous speaker. And also that you can listen to his book, Living Purpose. That's a sort of a million sellers book. And you could watch this TED Talk, A Life Purpose. It's a very good TED Talks, about 3 million people watching this TED Talks. So after you watch and then read these 2 articles, more or less you can make you a PowerPoint, you know, or what's a life purpose, okay? And that's for next week's assignment. One more thing I think I have to...
Yes, and I have put my email, I have 2 different email addresses you can email me at, but they're both the same there if you like, either one.
Excuse me. Yeah, Dr. E's model. Okay. Yes, Dr. E's model. We're going to have a discussion. You're going to choose graphic 1 or graphic 2 after you read 2 articles, okay? Sometimes graphic 2 is most important. It's more or less open-minded. And also his colleagues who won the Nobel Prize, they usually use Dr. E's model, the graphic 2, okay? So do you have any questions or comments? Any questions or comments? And then we're going to practice the 5 minutes presentation for next week. And then I think from next week on, you're going to learn also many various expressions and what the presentation is all about, technically speaking, like ABCD model, P principle, how can you bring your presentation alive, things like that sort. Theoretical, you know, presentation skills you're going to learn from next week on. And then I'd like to invite Professor Weakley sometime in the future you can also share the most important, idea about 4 pillars, right? Since you always talk about the 4 pillars of global leadership and whatever, just the servant leadership,
Yes,
that's
I
very
would
important.
be glad to come back and discuss servant
Yes.
leadership. Hi.
Okay, that's it for today. And also let's give him a big hand. Thank you very much for Professor Weakley. Yes, again, yep.
Thank you.
Okay, so
You're
I'll
welcome.
see you next week. And also I uploaded the same thing on the Facebook, all right? Yep, good.
Okay.
Thank you, bye-bye.
Thank you.
I'll see you next week.
Bye-bye.
Yep,
Good to see
bye-bye.
you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Good to see you.
Good to see you. Any question, Mr. Wada or Mr. Quentin? Do you have any question, comments? Wada-san, 何か質問ありますか? 大丈夫?
No problem.
Hi, okay. And Mr. Quentin, any questions? Hello?